Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. Let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome. I am your host Tia Harmer and today we are going to be discussing procrastination and how those things affect personal and work-related productivity. So I am here with Paul Miners. How are you today, Paul?
Hey Tia, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So for those who don't know you, do you mind explaining a bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, so I do lots of different things. So the label that I put on myself, although it might change depending on who I'm talking to, is that I'm a productivity consultant. And so on my website, paulminers.com, I've been blogging and podcasting about productivity since about 2015.
Oh, wow.
And then in 2016, I actually started a consulting business. So we now help teams, small to medium-sized businesses to use productivity tools like Asana, which is a project management tool, and Pipedrive, which is a sales CRM. And then we do a lot of work with a tool called Zapier, which is a really great way that you can automate your different systems and things. And so, I sort of monetize the business in a few different ways, but generally it's about helping people with productivity, working with businesses on their software and helping their teams to set up and use their productivity tools more effectively. Because I think, if you have good systems and good tools in place, you can get more done with your time. So that's basically what we do.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd just be curious, sort of a niche area to kind of consult on. How did you get into this area where you are today?
Yeah, well, the productivity started back when I was at university, actually. So, what was great about university, I found anyway, was at the start of the semester, the lecturers give you all the dates for like these are when your exams are, your midterms, these are when all your assignments are due. It's up to you, and especially going from school to like a college or university environment, you're very much on your own. Nobody's chasing you to attend class or hand in assignments. It is up to you. So it really taught me the importance of like personal accountability. But because at the start of the semester they gave us all these dates, I was like, okay, well, let me just put everything into my calendar. And I know I have an assignment due in 4 weeks, so let me block out some time to work on these things. Like I know I'm going to need an hour to work on the intro and then an hour to do this paragraph, and I'll kind of just digest everything that I was doing into my calendar. And this is what I call time blocking. And so I would basically work backwards from these deadlines that we were given and plan out when I was going to get everything done. And so that's really where I started developing a real interest in productivity and experimenting with different ways to organize my time and plan my work. And then it was a few years later, about 2014, 2015, after I'd been working for a few years at this point. I knew I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to kind of be my own boss and be self-sufficient. And I thought, what could I help people with? And I felt like, I've got some experience with productivity. It's something I'm interested in, and I think it's something people need help with. So that kind of started me on the blog, was just this interest in productivity. And then the consulting started. I started helping people with Asana first because I was working in marketing at an e-commerce company here in New Zealand, Mighty Ape, if anyone's heard of it. They actually have an Australian website as well. And like a lot of businesses, we tried a few different productivity tools for organizing our work, and we couldn't really find anything we liked. And then I found Asana. And even though I was working in marketing, it wasn't really my job description. Being the productivity geek that I am, I figured out how to use it. And long story short, we transitioned about 50 plus office staff over to using Asana.
Wow.
And the owner of the company, he was so pleased, he paid me a bonus because of the impact that it had. It really improved how we worked. So he paid me this bonus.
Oh,
And so it
so
was
good.
a few years later. Yeah, no, it's pretty good. Well, that was a really important moment because it made me realize, oh wow, like the owner of the business really sees value in this.
Mm,
So a few years later, when I'd started my blog and I was still working full time and I was just blogging as a bit of a hobby, but I was like, what could I do to really monetize this? And so I thought, well, maybe I can help people with Asana because if my old boss is going to pay me a bonus, maybe other business owners will pay for support as well.
mm.
And so I started offering that as a service, just as a bit of a side project. And then over the course of about 6 months, I quickly got to the point where I was earning more from this part-time consulting business than I was at my job. So I was like,
Yep.
okay, that's all the validation I need. And so I quit my job and took it full time. And then the business has kind of grown and I've diversified into other services from there. Yeah.
That's so awesome. You must have been like the most like studious, organized university student. Like I cannot relate at all. But that's so cool. No, that's a good point. Yeah, professors do give you the dates in advance. I'm currently studying at the moment, and so yeah, this should probably push me to be a little bit more organized.
Well, I'd started because I'd already used my calendar to just put all my lectures into my calendar. I was like,
Yeah, like
I'm going to use my
timetable.
calendar. Yeah, because
Yeah.
with your calendar, you typically use your calendar for things that are time sensitive. Like, okay, I need to be at this lecture at this time, or like this podcast that we're doing now. You sent me an invite. It's time sensitive. That's how most people use their calendar. Is they anything that's time sensitive goes into the calendar. So meetings, appointments. And I just took it a step further. And I'm not the first person to do this. This is not my invention by any means. But I was just like, well, okay, I know I have this assignment to do. I can either do it at the last minute and scramble, or if I just plan my time and put in some blocks where I'm going to do my readings before class or work on my assignment, then rather than scrambling and rushing at the last minute, I can actually create like a plan for how I'm going to get this done.
Mm. That's so great. So, as we've already mentioned today, we're going to be discussing procrastination. So, for our listeners, Paul, how would you define procrastination?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before.
No
But I
pressure.
think no, I think procrastination is really it's avoiding the work that you need to do. You know, it's either making excuses for why you shouldn't do something, or it could even be doing other work that's not as important as the work you should be doing. Sometimes we put off these like difficult tasks or awkward conversations, and you can procrastinate by doing other work. And even though you're doing work, it kind of feels productive. Yeah, I'm doing this other thing. I'm not procrastinating. You are, in a sense, procrastinating from what you actually need to be doing.
Yep.
So I think procrastinating it's the excuses we tell ourselves. It's delaying or putting barriers in place and putting things off to the future that you should be doing now.
Yeah. So that's a great definition. It's definitely something that's a little bit hard to define exactly because I think we all have different forms of procrastination. There's
Yeah,
different ways, like you said, you can always find something else to do instead of doing that one thing. And I think we're all very guilty of that. So we're going to dive into that a little bit later. But now we're going to do some sort of like rapid fire icebreaker questions
yeah,
so that the listeners can get to know you a little bit better. So I'm just going to ask you like 10 questions and then you just give me whatever comes to mind. Cool?
sure, cool,
Cool.
brilliant.
Okay. What is a book that you're currently reading or like just finished?
I'm actually currently reading. I'm looking at my bookshelf now. Um, the concise 48 Laws of Power. So
Wow, that does not sound concise. Not gonna
no,
lie.
so there's the 48 Laws of Power is like definitely a best-selling book by Robert Greene. Um, and by power, he's not always talking about like uh, you know bending people to your will. It's about just being able to like back yourself and being able to, I guess, like convince people to your way of thinking and making yourself heard sometimes. That's kind of what he's loosely means by power. And so he wrote this book years ago, 48 Laws of Power. And some of the laws, I mean, I'm still reading it right now. Some of the laws are things like concealing your intentions or not speaking too much. Like we often give away too much by over speaking because
Mm,
we're compensating for
yeah.
a lull in the conversations. Anyway, he outlines these 48 laws of power, and I'm reading the concise version. I was going to get the full book, and I realized that the full book is quite large, and often books I think get fluffed up with lots of examples, and
Yeah.
the concise version was well reviewed on Amazon, and I thought, yeah, I just want the nuggets,
We
so I
just want
bought
the
the
good
concise
stuff.
version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want the cliff notes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, what is one of your all-time favorite movies? This is always a question that some guests find quite difficult.
I could name loads. One of my all-time favorites. I love Inception by Christopher
Yeah,
Nolan. Great
so
movie.
good.
Actually, The Dark Knight, which is also a Christopher Nolan movie.
Christopher Nolan is so talented. Like, just
Yeah,
just putting that
Dark
out there.
Knight's great. Inception. Just some of the classics like Lord of the Rings. Being in New Zealand, maybe I'm biased, but just these movies that are made really well without too much like special effects, like lots of good practical effects. I really love.
Yeah.
Some of the old classics.
Have you gone to see like the Lord of the Rings, like the sites and stuff that are in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
film?
yeah. Well, here in New Zealand, so if you want to go skiing or snowboarding on the North Island, a lot of people go to Ruapehu, and so that mountain is where they filmed what's it called, Mount Doom.
Yeah.
So where Frodo and Sam
Oh,
are going up
so
Mount Doom at the
cool.
end, that is on like basically the ski slopes of Ruapehu.
That's so
um,
awesome.
so you basically drive up that bit of mountain to where they filmed, and then there's loads of places all over the South Island where they filmed some of the big battle scenes, and then obviously on the North Island as well in Matamata we have the Shire, Hobbiton. Um,
Wow, you just like live on a movie set.
yeah, well, it used to be a temporary set, but when they did the Hobbit movies, they knew they were going to have to rebuild the set, so they negotiated making it all out of permanent materials. So instead of it being made of like cheap wood and polystyrene, like it was for the original movies, when they redid it, they were like, "Can we build it out of brick and stone and like permanent
Wow.
materials?"
Yeah.
So you can go there now, and it's unbelievable. You are literally walking through the Shire.
That is so awesome. For those who haven't been to New Zealand, this is your sign to go.
Yeah, yeah. And they've
I,
got different sizes because they have some hobbit holes which are human size, so
yeah.
that when they're filming with an actor next to the human size one, they look like a hobbit because the size of
Ah.
the hobbit hole is the same as a human, so it looks
Yeah.
normal. But then when they had Ian McKellen, who's Gandalf,
Yeah.
on set, he is actually a human, and hobbits are obviously very small, so
Yeah.
they need him to look very big, and they can't make him bigger, so they make the hobbit holes smaller.
Oh,
So
that's so awesome.
there are some hobbit holes and the little gardens and wheelbarrows that are tiny because when they have Ian McKellen standing next to it, he looks massive. So it's
That
really
is
funny
so
that
awesome.
the different scales. Yeah,
That is so cool. Lord of the Rings fans are geeking out right now.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
so awesome. Thank you. So, besides your podcast and maybe our own, what is a podcast that you're currently obsessed with?
um, so I'm big into Bitcoin. So I really like a show called What Bitcoin Did. Um, it's a great show to just like it takes a really objective look at the pros and cons, and I think they do pretty good at having like a balanced discussion. And just it's a great show if you're interested in learning more about Bitcoin and how it works and what it can do. It's a great show. So I'm yeah kind of binging that at the moment.
Oh, that one's called What Bitcoin Did.
What Bitcoin Did, yeah, by Peter
That's so
McCormack.
cool.
Yeah,
Oh, awesome. Okay, what is a documentary that you've recently watched?
documentary. Jeez, what have I recently watched? I don't think I've watched a documentary in a while. Um,
No pressure.
hmm, I don't know.
There are some really good ones on Netflix that I can, if
There
you want
are.
recommendations.
Well, I've there's plenty that I've watched.
What's one of your favorites then?
Um, I don't know if I have a favorite documentary. There's plenty that are like interesting, but unlike movies, there's none I've like gone back and rewatched. Do you know what I mean?
They tend to
There's
not
plenty of
really be
interesting ones.
things you rewatch. I don't know why. It's just not
Yeah,
really something I'm like, okay, I got the information now. I'm content.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'll let you know if I think of something while we're chatting today. I'll come back to that one. But I
That's
haven't
okay.
watched a documentary in a while. Yeah.
I'm definitely guilty of like going on Netflix just to find documentaries. I don't know. I just find them so fascinating. I watched one on like Boeing and their planes and like what happened in terms of
Mm.
like the degradation of like the quality and the
Oh,
standards.
I
That's
think
really
that's
good.
I think that's on my list actually.
Highly recommend.
So I saw that. What were some of the popular ones recently? I can't remember. I like some of the explained ones. So it's not really they're not like movie length. The explained series are like sort of I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 minute
Is that by
episodes.
Vox?
Vox, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So they do these sort of short little episodes explaining like how diamonds are made and sold, and explaining different diets and oil and just random topics like how fashion,
Yeah.
is it fashion or like fast fashion, and just these short little episodes. I really like those because then again they're nice and bite sized. You can kind of just skim and see which ones look interesting, and you can watch one for like 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, YouTube is the best place for that, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, this is on Netflix, the explained ones.
Oh, right. Yeah, they are too. Yeah. We love Vox. Okay. So, who is your famous role model? I love this question.
Favorite role model? Do you mean?
Or famous, favorite, whatever, whichever.
Like, do I have a famous role model?
Do you?
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood the question. Like, so do I have a role model?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure who is my famous role model. Role models. Yeah, I'm a big Apple fan as well. Like, so
Mm.
I always look back at like Steve Jobs and
Legendary.
like the impact that he had and his approach, and when movies have come out about him, or yeah, was it movie? There was the Ashton Kutcher one. There was the Fassbender one. But the books, I've really enjoyed the books on Steve Jobs as well.
Mm.
I've actually, for our 3-year-old boy, they do these little. I've forgotten what the series is called. Little Heroes or something, and
Oh.
they do these like biographies for kids about famous people.
Oh, so
So,
cool.
so we got one about Steve Jobs, and so it's written for a child. It's got like nice little illustrations, but
Cute.
it's just about their life. So they've got like Steve Jobs. We bought John Lennon. You've got like Mother Teresa, Gandhi.
Are they the
Lots of
books?
yeah. They're like
Or
short
the
little children's
Yeah, I've
books.
seen these.
Yeah, yeah.
So cute.
So now, like Steve Jobs is someone who, it's funny because I always say like, the world is kind of like this really crazy place right now.
Mm.
It seems like whether it's COVID or war with Russia and Ukraine and all the inflation that we're seeing, like the world is, when you just think it's kind of getting back to normal, it just gets a little bit crazier
Yeah.
and a little bit more uncertain as well. I think a lot of people just aren't sure what's going to happen. And I sometimes think like, oh man, I wonder what Steve would say if he was here. Because like, do you know what I mean? He was just like a really
Yeah.
influential person. Obviously had a very big impact on the world. I think
Mm.
Apple, obviously being a massive company, has a lot of influence as well. So sometimes I feel like, what would he say about the world if he could see it today?
Yeah, that would be really interesting. It's mild spoiler alert for upcoming guests that we might have. Not Steve Jobs, um, but for an upcoming guest. Bit of a spoiler alert for listeners. So stay tuned for that. Okay, moving on. Who is your favorite artist? This can be like musician, actor.
Yeah, I've got lots of actors I really like. I love like Tom Hanks. Um, he's really good. Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman as well, because he seems like the kind of person, when you listen to him in an interview, he just seems like a normal person. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, from what I've heard as well, I actually listened to a recent interview with him on the Tim Ferriss podcast. And I think something that Tim said was that he's exactly the same in person as you would expect him to be. Like he's not putting on
Wow.
this sort of character. He's not acting a different way in interviews. Like he's just really down to earth and like a genuinely just nice person. And so I really admire that. I also artists, movies. Yeah, Christopher Nolan as a director, I think is
Yep,
really good.
definitely.
Um, Authors, I really like Ryan Holiday.
Okay.
So Ryan Holiday, I think actually was a so he wrote the books. I don't know if you know his books. He wrote the books like The Obstacle is the Way, Stillness is the Key, um, which are books about Stoic philosophy.
Right.
So which is a lot of ideas that I live by now, partly because of his reading, or his writing rather. So his books really introduced me to like Stoic teaching and these Stoic principles, just like a good framework for how to live your life. I'm not like a religious person, I have good morals, you know,
Yeah.
but like I'm like I don't follow any religion, so I don't have that. A religion gives you like a really good framework, I guess, for like how to live. But not being a religious person, I've been attracted to like Stoicism because it's not religious in any way.
Yeah.
Stoicism is just a philosophy. It's just guidelines for how to live like a happy life. And so Ryan Holiday's writing on Stoicism, his books have had a big impact on me. So yeah, I really and he's just got a great writing style as well. He's great at like taking a topic and digesting it and sharing it in a really easy to understand way.
Okay, that sounds good. So that's Ryan Holiday.
Ryan Holiday, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. We'll have to look out for those.
Mm.
Okay, what is a recent course you have completed?
Course. This week actually, this
Okay.
I did an impulse buy. This is nothing to do with like business or personal development.
Yep.
I guess it's kind of personal development. I was scrolling through Instagram as you do, and Instagram knows me scarily well, and I got this ad for an instructional golf video about how not to slice the ball, which is if you've ever done some golf, if you hit the
No.
ball off the tee, slicing it's where it like curves off to the right.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And so it's a thing that a lot of golfers struggle with, me definitely included. And so this video came up. It's like, do you struggle with slicing the ball? I was like, yes, I do.
Yes.
So I bought this. It's almost like just a mini course. It was like $50, and it
That's
was
so
by this
cool.
guy. I think his name's Hank Haney, who was Tiger Woods' former golf coach.
Wow.
And so I literally just watched that the other day, and then went to the range to practice, and it worked. It's. I mean, it hasn't fixed me. It hasn't fixed my slice yet, but it's definitely helping. And so I
Okay.
literally sort of was signed up to that the other day. Yeah.
That's so good. That's so fascinating. All right, and last question. What is an event that you've recently attended? This can be in real life or online.
Uh, Events. I mean, done a few weddings this summer, but those aren't probably the events you're
So
thinking
many
about.
weddings. So many weddings.
Yeah, lots of weddings, especially in March. March is always busy wedding season.
Yeah.
Events. I mean, I've done a few. I hosted a webinar myself recently. I hosted an Asana webinar, which was good fun.
Oh wow.
And then what did I do? Um, I mean, obviously with COVID, haven't done as much as I normally would. I
Yeah.
mean, I attend some. There are some like Pipe Drive online events every couple of months. Being part of Pipe Drive's like partner network, we attend these sort of virtual events every few months, and the Pipe Drive team are really good at like keeping us up to date with changes to their product and
Yeah.
what's coming up and that kind of thing. So that's sort of very very specific to my industry, really. But yeah, haven't done a lot of events
That's okay.
recently.
I
No,
think we can
yeah,
count weddings. I think that
yeah, weddings,
I
sure.
think that's enough. I think there's been so many of those on recently
I
that
have a 30th.
they
There's
count
a
as
friend's 30th this weekend as well. I'm going to
aw,
that.
fun. That's so nice. Yeah, so many birthdays and weddings, and it's just
Yeah,
like everyone's been holding out for like 2 years. So now
yeah.
there's like
I
everything.
am gutted. I mentioned I was a Bitcoin fan, and right now, today, this week,
Mm.
is the Bitcoin conference in Miami, which I would have loved to have gone to.
There's a
But right,
conference?
it's a conference, yeah. So
Oh,
I would have loved to have gone to it. Unfortunately, if you leave New Zealand right now, you basically can't get back in. They're going to be opening the borders up in a few months, or maybe it was next month or the month after. I can't remember. I
yeah.
can't keep up with all the rule changes, to be honest. So for that reason, just leaving and probably like just the question mark around getting back into the country meant it was too hard to go. But I would have loved to have
Yeah.
gone to that.
That's totally valid. No, yeah, we're based in Melbourne, and the restrictions I think change on like a weekly basis.
Yeah, I can't.
Um,
I'm just working at home, so it's just like, just let me know when it's over.
exactly. No, 100%. All right, so let's travel back to procrastination now and productivity. So we discussed the definition of procrastination, but I'm curious as to whether you think there's a difference between the definition of personal versus workplace procrastination. Is there a difference?
Good question. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you can procrastinate in different ways. Like I said, at work, you can procrastinate. either by, yeah, maybe when you should be working, you might go on social media or watch some videos and genuinely, like, it's the worst form of procrastination because you're not doing anything. Like, you're literally wasting your time. And then you've got like a form of procrastination, like I talked about, where you procrastinate with other types of work. So even though you should be doing this one thing over here, because you maybe don't know where to start, or it's difficult, or you don't have a plan, you procrastinate by doing other forms of work, by doing your email or by whatever, making yourself busy with something else. And so you're putting off something you need to do by doing other work that makes you kind of trick yourself into feeling like you're being productive, but really, you should be spending time on this other thing. And this is what like books like Eat That Frog talk about. Eat That Frog is about work on that. Eating the frog is like eating the frog is
This
disgusting.
is yeah,
It's
can you
yeah,
explain
it's like
that, please?
it's Eat the Frog. The concept is basically, you have something important you need to do, but you don't want to do it because it's difficult, or maybe you need to have an awkward conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
So it's this thing you don't want to do. You don't want to eat the frog, but you should eat the frog, because once you get that difficult thing out of the way, it just makes life a lot easier. It clears the way for you to then work on other things, and most importantly, it means you can move that difficult project forward. So Eat the Frog is just about, don't, just because it's a hard work, don't avoid it. Don't put off the hard
Yeah.
work. So yeah, I think there's a few forms of procrastination like that, and then personal procrastination. I think the same things apply. You can either just like not use your time well. You can um, procrastinate from doing housework by sitting and scrolling on your phone,
Yeah.
or you can avoid things that you should be doing. Um, by doing other things. So, yeah, I guess to answer your question, no, I don't see a huge difference between personal and work-based. I just think you can procrastinate in different ways. And the thing I see is that people trick themselves into feeling productive when they're actually avoiding what they really need to be doing.
Yeah. So outside of procrastination, what do you believe to be the main challenges that can hinder an individual's personal productivity?
A couple of things. One I would say is like a lack of maybe discipline. And so people often know what they need to do. They know what work they should be doing or what project they should be working on, but they maybe just lack the discipline around holding themselves to like a good routine or habits. Like forming good habits often is just about being disciplined and holding yourself accountable. So that, I think, is one, is just like not holding yourself accountable slash a lack of discipline. And the other, I think, is like not having a good system or process in place. And this helps with the discipline issue and the procrastination issue. Is sometimes people are unproductive or disorganized because they don't have a good way of managing everything they're doing. Whether it's like, I don't have a tool for seeing all the work that I need to do,
Yeah.
or I'm not using my calendar effectively, so I don't have a good plan for my time, or my computer's a mess and I've got files saved on my desktop and I haven't
Yeah.
I haven't put them into folders and organized everything. Like, you don't have a good system. And I think the system, if you sort your system, if you have a good set of tools and processes in place, and if you follow the right habits in terms of how you use that system, it will address the discipline issue and it addresses the
Mm.
procrastination issue. So I think, yeah, like having a good system which helps you to be disciplined is something that we talk about with a lot of our clients. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's part of your area of expertise is just helping people and equipping them with the tools to actually be productive. Because I think, I've been at uni for a couple years now, sort of extending my study a little bit. And it's changed. Like the way I was in first year is completely
Yeah.
different to how I'm studying now because I've got different tools now and learning how to be more productive with the time that I have. And having those like organization apps and like
Mm.
tools and stuff, I always sort of discounted how like helpful they would be. I was always like, no,
Yeah.
like I don't need that. Like that's just gonna add to my chaos. But it
Yeah.
doesn't. It's actually
'Cause
really helpful.
personally, if I'm ever feeling like under the pump, got a lot on, a little bit stressed out, I try not to stress too much, but like if I'm ever feeling a bit stressed out, um, what I'll do is organize myself.
Yeah.
So whether it's like going into my to-do list, right? Let's look at this. Let's get it sorted. Let's put some dates on everything. Let's work out when I'm going to do it. Let's check my calendar. Like, how am I going to use this time today? What's the most important thing I need to work on? What do I want to achieve for the rest of the week? Let's make some time for those important things. Let's actually put that into the calendar. Could even be cleaning up my physical environment. Sometimes it's just like, my physical environment is a bit of a mess. Maybe I just need to clean my desk, or even personally, like, let's just clean the house a little bit. Let's just get a little bit sorted. And so once you sort your stuff, your work, even cleaning up your physical environment, that's something I like to do, because then it feels like, even though I have a lot going on, at least now I'm organized and I have a plan.
Yeah.
It's when I have a lot going on and I have no plan, that's when the stress kicks in.
Yep. No, 100%. I can definitely agree with that. Yeah, you have to just make sure you have a bit of an understanding of what you're actually supposed to be doing, and having a clean space really just changes the game.
Yeah, and I was talking about this with my colleague the other day, because this is a full-time contractor who works with me. He's basically an employee, and he feeling a bit under the pump. We have a lot of projects on the go right now. And so I was helping him to schedule his calendar and say, like, right, this is when you should work on each client. This is who's a priority, and so on. And I just said to him, we had a call the other day because we both virtual. And I said, don't worry. Like, yes, we have a lot to do, but now we have a plan. Like, it's on your calendar. We know when you're going to do everything, and nobody's unhappy as long as we're clear with expectations as well about when things are going to get done. As long as we communicate that to people,
Yeah.
so they know not to chase us as well, and we're clear about when they can expect things. We have this plan. Don't worry about it. Yes, we have a lot to do, but that we have a plan now. And he did. Yeah, like, we ended the call, we had the plan, and he was like, yeah, I said, like, has this helped? Do you feel better? And he's like, yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's very important, like you said, and it just changes sort of how you can feel. And you brought up an interesting point in terms of, therefore, like, when you've got a plan and you've let other people know, they don't have to chase you up, which I think
Yeah.
can be really frustrating when you're like, I've got this plan and I know what I'm doing, but people are constantly asking you about it, and you're just kind of like, if you shared the plan with other people and they know where you're at, then it just prevents that sort of like useless sort of
Yeah.
conflict. So yeah, not having to chase people up is
Hmm.
nice. Definitely. Okay, so let's talk about hustle culture. Um, Hustle baby seems to be a bit of a catchphrase everywhere now. It's on people's
Yeah.
mugs and bags and everything. But hustle culture is defined as the state of overworking till it's almost like a lifestyle, or at
Yeah.
least that's my understanding of it. Is that your understanding of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts essentially on hustle culture in regards to productivity? Sort of what do you think are the positive and negative side effects of this hustle culture that we have?
I mean, I think there's a time and a place. And yes, hustle culture and hustling can be useful, but long term, it's not sustainable. So I used to be more of a subscriber to, like, yeah, let's hustle. And, back when I was starting my business in sort of like 2015, 2016, it was really important for me to hustle, because I was like, I need to get this business off the ground. I'm working a full-time job. I'm going to have to work in the mornings and evenings to get this done. For me, at that point in my life, working on this side business and getting it off the ground, hustling was really important, and it helped me to get going. And, like, do you know Gary Vaynerchuk, the entrepreneur? He's one of these. He's in the US. He's in New York. He has a social media agency and has done a lot of, like, content marketing and stuff. But
Okay.
he's a big, like,
Yeah.
hustle porn, advocate, and he's all about the hustle. And that he was somebody I was listening to a lot at the time, because, again, it was appropriate for that time of my life. But long term, I don't think it's sustainable, and it's not what I want for myself either. Like, when I ask myself, like, well, why do I want to work for myself? What's the end result here? Well, I want to have more freedom. I want to be more self sufficient. Ultimately, so I can actually free up my time to spend with my family, or to take some time off during the week to do the things that I enjoy. Like, I don't want to do, like, the 9 to 5 all the time. I want to have a bit more freedom and flexibility in my schedule. And so if I'm hustling, if I'm building a business and a job that requires that hustle, it's not it's taking me further from where I want to be, which is more personal freedom. So hustling was important in the beginning to get the business going,
Yeah.
and even for the first couple of years. But now, like, I'm in a nice place where I can enjoy the benefits of the work that I've done. I've got the system and I've got a team around me now, and so I don't need to hustle as much anymore. But depending on the project or maybe clients we're working with, maybe I need to, like, you know, hustle a little bit for a short period of time. So I think hustling is kind of like, it's like sprinting with your work. It's sprinting, it's working harder, putting in full maximum effort for a short period of time, but you will burn out. Just like you can't sprint for a kilometer nonstop,
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
you need to, like, slow down eventually because you need to rest. Otherwise, you're just going to not finish the race.
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on what you think of sort of this generation of hustle culture. I'm not, entirely sure if this was something that was, prevalent, like 30, 40 years ago. I think maybe in the 80s, possibly, but I feel like that was
Mm,
more of like the girl boss kind of vibe.
yeah.
But going back like 50, 60 years ago, from what I'm aware of, hustle culture wasn't really kind of a thing. So
Mm,
this generation, and you're looking at people like you got like Kylie Jenner, and you've got like Jungkook from BTS, and all these really young people who are like 21, 22, and they're really sort of pushing this hustle culture. So why do you think people of this generation in particular are obsessed with hustle culture?
yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe one of the things is, like, it's something people say a lot on social media, so that's partly it. I think it
Yeah.
sounds good on social media. On Instagram,
Yeah.
you can share a motivational story about how you're working really hard, and I always laugh because I've got friends and I see people who show, this is where I'm working from today, and they post a picture with their laptop sitting outside somewhere, putting in the hustling hard today. It's like, yeah, but you still took out your phone and shared it on social media. Like,
Yeah, you're on Instagram.
so
Yeah.
I don't know. You think you're hustling, but you're wasting time, to share it.
Yeah.
So I mean, never have I once shared, like, this is where I'm working today or whatever.
I find it so awkward. Just kind of like, this is sort of,
Yeah, I find it I find it a bit cringy. I think as well, technology connects us and keeps us online more than ever, especially since COVID, because a lot of people are working remote. There's almost, and I think if the workplace culture that you work in isn't healthy, you can have these workplace cultures where you are expected to be on 24/7 call. Like, if I email you, I expect a reply pretty quickly, or if I send you a message on Microsoft Teams or Slack, I expect a quick response.
yeah.
And so I think the technology, because it gets abused, and I think because a lot of teams don't put good protocols around how to use the technology, they don't have these protocols in place. People just use instant message tools. They use tools like Asana, Slack, Zoom to keep in constant communication.
Mm.
And especially because if you're working remote, managers and bosses want to keep on top of their team and see what's going on. It's created this expectation that you always need to be connected and you always need to be responding. So that's kind of more fuel on the hustle fire, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of young people, procrastination affects everyone from childhood through to adulthood, etc. Now, I don't know about you, but I procrastinated more in high school than I did in university. I'm not sure for a lot of people this is not the case, but I think I procrastinated more in high school. I don't know. I just, you were there every day and you just didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So, what would you tell a concerned parent whose child seems to be struggling with procrastination?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we do have a 3-year-old, and actually we're expecting another baby soon. But yeah, he's 3, so haven't he's not at school yet. So I don't know if I'm the most qualified to give this advice. Maybe in a few years. But I think if I was, like, looking ahead, number one is I would tell myself, well, don't worry too much, because, like, school isn't right for everyone. It's not to say, like, you shouldn't send your kids to school, but, like, if I send my son to school and he doesn't excel at certain subjects, or is just, maybe he's just not that academic, I don't think I'll be too concerned. And you look, famous last words, maybe I'll eat my words, or maybe there's a parent listening going, you have no idea what you're talking about. But like, um, I think my approach is going to be when our boy goes to school is like, I want to see him excel and do well at what he enjoys.
Yep.
So it might not be the academic subjects. He might not respond well to the class environment where, really, because school is outdated, right? Like
Mm.
a lot of the way we learn now, you've got these big classrooms, one teacher trying to teach lots of people. A lot of kids don't do well learning that way.
Yep.
Um, but maybe he'll do well with sports, or
Yep.
maybe he'll pick up a hobby or something that he really enjoys. So I think as our boy grows, like I'll be keeping my eye out for, well, what does he really enjoy? What is he naturally good at? What does he want to engage in? And I'm going to do my best to encourage and kind of support those things.
Yeah. No, exactly. I completely agree. I think it's helping that child sort of figure out what their passion is and what they love doing, and maybe where their strengths and weaknesses are. And I think when you let them, I don't have kids, but I do have a 13-year-old brother and an 18-year-old brother, and I was very involved in their childhood as an older sister. So I've seen the ups and downs of not wanting to do schoolwork or being a
Yeah.
bit too about something, or leaving the assignment to the day before. That has happened too many times. But yeah, I think it's about sort of watching where their passions are and seeing how they learn, and
Yeah.
sort of what it is exactly that draws them to that subject. And I find that if you encourage them and give them that sort of motivation in that area,
Yeah.
that energy can it'll transfer over into other things. When they feel
Yeah.
like they're doing good at this one thing, then they're like, "Oh, okay, like, I'll do this because I'm just gonna do it." Like, it tends to transfer over. So I think, yeah, for those concerned parents whose children are struggling with procrastination, I never procrastinated more than I did when I was in high school. And I
Yeah.
still graduated
I mean,
and still came out well. So I think you're okay.
I'm sure as well, like when our boy goes to school and he starts getting homework and reading assignments and essay assignments and things like that, I'm sure I'll ask him like, hey, when are you going to do this? Have you made time for it? Like, do you know how long it's going to take to do this, read this book or to do that assignment? Like, I'm sure I'll, being the productivity geek that I am, like just help guide him on some of those things. Like, when are you going
Yeah.
to do this? And oh, so you want to go play right now, or you want to go to your friend's house? And what about the assignment? Have you got an idea of when you're going to do that? I'm sure I'll be helping with those kinds of things and helping him to plan his time. Yeah.
Yeah. The perks of having a productive parent.
But I think
So
it's important to let kids make mistakes as well. So, like,
yeah.
you know, if he wants to go and, I don't know, play outside, play sport, or hang out with a friend, and then he leaves the assignment to the last minute, you've got to like let them make that mistake a few times,
Yeah,
and
they'll
then you
see
can
the
say,
repercussions.
yeah, and then he'll get the next assignment, and I'll say, hey, do you remember last time you left it to the last minute? Do you remember how stressful it was? And do you remember how you probably didn't get the grade you expected to, and that kind of you felt a bit
Mm.
let down by that? Do you remember that? Yeah, okay, maybe we should do it differently this time.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, you do just have to let them kind of make those mistakes. I've definitely learnt from, yeah, leaving assignments to the last minute and just being like, "Oof, we're not gonna do that again."
Yeah,
So yeah, I think, yeah, let them find their passions, let them grow, let them make mistakes, and encourage them as much as you can. That's kind of all
yeah.
you can really do.
I was talking to a friend the other day who's a parent as well. He's got two boys, which is funny because we're going to have two boys when our next one arrives, and then
Oh,
he's got two boys who are older. So his
right.
eldest, who is now 10, he was saying when he was younger, they were on a road trip in the car, and his boy was, I think, watching something on the phone or the iPad, watching something to let the time go by, and he said to him, "Don't watch too much. You're going to be sick." And he's like, "No, no, no, no. I'll be fine. I'll be fine." Yeah, what do you know? He was sick in the car. And so
Oh,
he let the kid make the mistake.
yeah.
And then now his eldest is teaching the younger one how to avoid the mistake. So when the younger one is now watching the iPad in the car, he says, "Don't do that. I was sick because I did that and you shouldn't do it. And so now you've got the eldest actually helping the younger one, which I
Yeah.
thought is like brilliant.
Yes, exactly. Older siblings, all the way,
Yeah.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about the planning fallacy. So for those who don't know, this was a challenge or sort of a term coined in relation to procrastination. So when an individual fails to create a realistic schedule to abide by, and then the result of this is more often than not disappointment in uncompleted tasks. So, what advice do you have to those who struggle with making realistic plans and schedules?
Yeah. I mean, I go through the process of like, if you struggle with making a plan, there's a couple of things I like to do. First is kind of know where you want to get to. So like, what's the goal at the end of the day? Now, sometimes that's obvious, like if you're working on an assignment or some project where maybe the end result is obvious. But sometimes you almost need to step back. Like, for example, in starting my business, I was like, well, why am I doing this? Like I said, it's about that personal freedom and self-sufficiency. So whatever it is, I think understanding the why is important behind any work that you do. Why am I doing this? If you don't understand why, or like how is this project going to get me forward, how is this advancing me towards my goals, could even be personal. Like maybe you have like a personal health and fitness goal to lose weight or to gain weight or whatever it might be. Understanding the why is really important. So getting clear on that is number one. And then when it comes to actually making the plan, often I find it easier to work backwards. Like I said, when I was back at university, when I was given those assignments, it's like, right, I know the assignment is due on whatever date, this date of this month. So I've got 6 weeks to get it done.
Yeah.
And if I break out, like, what are the steps that I need to go through to, like, if I, again, using my university example, I need to write like an intro paragraph. I need to do like 4 or 5 main paragraphs, the body of my argument, and then I need to write a conclusion. I'm going to have to write all of that. That's going to be my first draft. And then I'm going to have to do like 2 or 3 rounds of iterations where I get maybe some feedback and like revise it and just do that final polishing work. And so those are the steps that I need to take. Now let me think about, well, how long do I need to do for each one of those? Like, let's try and allocate some actual hours. Like, if I give myself an hour, I could write a pretty good introduction in an hour. And same for like the first paragraph. Maybe I need like 60 minutes or 90 minutes, and that's going to include maybe finding a few resources. Actually, maybe that might be separate, like, going to the library and finding some resources to support my argument or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So actually working out what are the steps, how long do I need for each one? Now let me, working backwards, put that onto the calendar. And this is where you can actually use a tool. Before we talked about systems and how they help with discipline, you can take a tool like your calendar and literally put blocks of time on your calendar for doing these things. So, okay, I don't want to, with me, I didn't want to hand my essay in on the day of the due date. I want to get it in at least a day before. just because I want to get it in early. I don't want to leave it to the day. Who knows as well? Like maybe the bus breaks down on the day I want to hand it in, or something bad happens. Like I'm just going to try and hand it in a day before.
Yeah.
So, okay, I know that if I'm going to hand it in a day before, I want to do the final. I need to do that final kind of revision or polishing work, like a day before that or 2 days before that. I'm going to need 2 hours to do that. Right, put that on the calendar. Okay, I'm going to have to do an hour to do the each of these paragraphs. Let's put that on the calendar. So planning, I mean, I guess to summarize the steps that I've outlined, number one is understanding your why. Number two is like dissecting down the work into the smaller steps. Sometimes it's really hard to get started on something because you're just looking at this really big project that you need to do. And it's really hard to plan something that seems really big. So break it down into the steps, right? I'm not going to write an essay. Writing an essay is too hard. I'm just going to write the introductory paragraph, break it down into the small bite-sized pieces, then put those on the calendar and actually assign yourself some time to do those things. That's how I like to plan. And it's a really tangible way of taking this project or whatever it is that you're working on and actually making time for it. Actually putting it on your calendar, making time. That's an expression I really like, is you should be making time for things. Everyone says like, I don't have time. That's a terrible thing to say. You should never, ever, ever use the words, I don't have time.
Yeah.
What you actually mean, because we all have time. We all have the same amount of time in our day, right? We all have time. So when you say I don't have time, what you mean is I don't want to make time for that. If they say I don't have time to do that, what you're saying is I can't make time for that because I'm making time for other things.
Yep.
So you could be thinking about making time for things. So sorry, a bit of a tangent there, long waffly answer, but I hope that helped. I
No,
hope
we
that's
love
helpful.
we love long waffly answers here. So I guess okay, are you a to-do list person? That's
Yep. Yep.
okay. All right, because I like to-do lists, but I don't like making sort of daily to-do lists. Do you make daily to-do lists?
I do, but I don't make them every day.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
don't start them. I don't start my day by writing a to-do list.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's fair because I like to-do lists, don't get me wrong. I think it's very important to sort of break things down
Yeah.
and schedule things in, but I'm definitely more of a calendar person because when it comes to to-do lists, especially daily ones or just even I tend to stick to like weekly ones because
Yeah.
otherwise I get really disappointed when they aren't completed.
Mm.
And I think it's in our nature as humans to assume that we can do way more than we're actually capable of in like a certain
Yeah.
amount of time. And I don't know if that's just because I have bad time management skills. But my day can change so quickly.
Yeah.
And so I hate to think that I wasn't productive just because I didn't do those particular things. So I'm just sort of like always in this weird sort of balance where I'm like, I have
Yeah.
this to-do list and this is what I need to do, but I don't want to like write things down in sort of, pen and paper
Yeah.
because then I'm so scared that if I don't get them done, I'm just going to be really disappointed. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess it's sort of like what you said, sort of making realistic plans and schedules and actually breaking it down because I will be the sort of person I used to be anyway, a lot more in sort of first year uni in terms of making like really big goals and this not happening. Like I'm gonna write all of my essay or like, write at least like 3 paragraphs or whatever and in like an hour. And it's just never gonna happen. So I
Yeah.
think sort of understanding how fast you can work and what your most efficient self is,
Yeah.
and then making sort of your realistic plans and
Yeah.
schedules from there. Because you have to sort of know how you work.
Yeah. So I use both. So I have a task list, which is Asana. It's a project management tool, and I use my calendar. So it's not either or. It's both for
Yeah,
me anyway. The reason I need both, or the reason I use both, is that if I just use the calendar, if I want to just see more holistically what's all the work I have on the go right now, like all the clients I'm working with, the projects we're working on, admin work, like just I want to see what's on my plate. It would be quite hard to do that with a calendar.
yeah,
Because you can't really. I mean, yeah, you've got. Yeah, I was going to say you can't really zoom out. Yes, you can see like a monthly view, but you can't. There's no like list of projects with like here's each project and the tasks you need to do for each project. You
yeah,
can't see that on a calendar. So that's why I need a tool like Asana. Is I can actually see here's every project, and because I work in a team, who's responsible for what and when everything is due. So that's
yeah,
where the work lives. But then the calendar is a tool that I use with the task list to actually plan when am I going to get these things done. So I actually use it to block out, okay, well, these are the things that we want to do this week. I've only got 8 hours a day for 5 days to do them in. What can I put on my calendar? And the great thing about putting it on your calendar is it forces you to take your task list, which is a list of really just good intentions. Um, and like you said, it's very easy to overestimate what you can do in a day or a week, but we often underestimate what we can do in a year. I can't remember who said that, but it's something I've heard before. I think it's pretty true.
yeah,
So we often overestimate what we can do in a week. And so by putting things on your calendar, it forces you to prioritize. So you go, right, here's, I don't know, 20 things I want to do this week.
mm,
You start blocking out time on your calendar. The great thing about putting them on your calendar, if you work in that week view, the weekly layout, you actually have to allocate an amount of time.
yeah,
Whereas with a task list, if you just use a task list, it's very easy to overcommit to things
yeah,
because you can just create lots of tasks, but not all tasks are created equal. Some of them might take 5 minutes, some might take 5 hours. So the great thing about the calendar is that it forces you to take that list and actually make a plan and allocate time to each task. So I will block out time for things as small as 15 minutes and as big as like, 2 to 3 hours
mm,
are these blocks on my calendar. And so when I'm creating my plan for the week, if I am running down my task list and my week is filled with the first 10 things on my list, and I have 10 things that I haven't made time for, then I have to make some trade-offs and go, well, okay, if I want to get some of these things on here, I have to shuffle things around. Maybe I have to bump something to next week. I have to now make trade-offs and actually prioritize. So that's why personally I like to use both. Is I've got my project management, task management tool, which is where the work lives. It's where I can see my kind of what's in our pipeline, what have I got coming up for the next few weeks or months. And then the calendar, which is the tool we use at a granular level to plan when are we actually going to get these things done.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, we're talking about procrastination today. That to me really helps the procrastination issue, because by putting something on your calendar, remember what I said at the start, most things we put on our calendar are things that are time sensitive, things
Yeah.
usually when we've committed to somebody else as well. Like I've committed to turn up to this podcast interview with you today.
Yeah.
We both committed to be here. We don't want to show up late because we've made that commitment. So by putting your tasks on your calendar, you're kind of making that same commitment to yourself like you do with an appointment with somebody else. So you're putting it on your calendar and you're saying, right, from 10 till 11 o'clock, I am working on this. And so I think it helps you to overcome procrastination, because number one, you've got a plan. And so half the work is done. You now have a plan. But number two, you've kind of made that mental commitment yourself to do the work.
Yep. No, definitely. I think it's important to have that balance. I just started using Notion like 2 months ago. Totally
Yeah.
changed my life.
Mhm.
Like, has helped in so many different ways. And because my commitment level for some reason has just stepped up dramatically. Maybe that's just because, we're all in a bit of a daze from the past 2 years. So what is a commitment is a bit sort of blurry. But yeah, Notion and my calendar, and it's just, finally everything feeling a little bit more organized after like 2 years.
Yeah.
So let's talk about workplace procrastination and productivity in the workplace. So I think at the moment, a lot of employers are struggling with this concept in terms of the procrastination of their employees and the fact that a lot of the time they're at home
Yeah.
and you can't see them. And I think a lot of employers are very stressed about the fact that they're possibly not getting as much work done. But in saying that, I think we're all very guilty of procrastinating in the office. And there are definitely, things that you can do to waste time when you're in the office.
Yeah.
So, what would be your top 3 tips that you can offer employers or employees who struggle with procrastination and have their work productivity at stake?
Yeah. I mean, definitely number one would be like using some kind of work management tool. I mean, yeah, we use Asana. There's tools like Monday, Notion, Basecamp. I think every business needs some system for managing their work. It's always surprising to me when I when I get approached by a client. Actually, it happened to me today. It was a law firm, and they said, "Oh, this is where we're using Asana. We need some help." It's our first time using a project management tool or any tool for managing our work, and I'm like,
That sounds like a law firm.
how have you been managing your business? Like, how do you know what to do? Or just even having a list of clients. I guess maybe they have it in a spreadsheet. I don't know. But like, I'm always surprised. I'm like, how have you got your business to where it is without some way of managing your work, especially if you work in a team? So I think that's number one, super important. Just having a tool to manage your work, as in where you can lay out, here are the projects we're working on. And so what we're doing, who's doing it, and when is it due? Who, what, when? You
Yep.
need a tool, I think, that shows you for each piece of work those 3 things: who, what, and when. Because then, if managers and business owners can have a bit of trust, towards their team, we can then say, look, okay, we're working remotely. I can't look over your shoulder and see what you're doing. This is how you're going to be measured. Obviously it's different for every employee and different jobs and businesses, but this is how you're going to be measured. These are the metrics we care about. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's customer satisfaction, maybe it's how quickly we can do the job, whatever it is. Everyone can be measured some way, I suppose. And the business owner or the manager will know if the person is delivering results. Like, how are you measuring that person's performance? So then you can say, right, this is how you're being measured. We have this work management tool, so I can give you the work. If we have a project, we can set it up in here. I can see when it's due, and let's get on with it. If you're working from home and If you want to start your day really early because you like getting up early and you want to finish at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, do that.
Yeah.
And as long as you're delivering the results that we've agreed that's how you're being measured, I don't mind when you work. Same thing if you want to get up late and spend time, walk your kids to school or whatever, and then start your day at 10 o'clock or whatever it might be, or go to the gym in the morning, and then you want to start at 10 and you're going to work later in the day. Fine. I mean, yeah, maybe there needs to be some flexibility there for teams that need to connect at different times if you've got like an all hands meeting during the week or something. But that's something that we've worked with lots of different businesses, and those are the workplace cultures that we find are really successful. Is when people know how they're being measured or how their performance is being tracked. And then there's that trust. There's that mutual trust that, look, you know how you're going to get measured. We've got this. We've got a way of managing our work, so I can see if you're getting things done. I can see if these tasks that I'm assigning you are overdue. If you're falling behind, we will see it. Because if you don't have a tool, if you're just using email to track what everyone's doing, it's very hard to see, like, are we falling behind?
Mm.
Whereas a work management tool like Asana really makes it pretty clear, like when things are on track, when you're falling behind. You can literally see people's tasks and they turn red, when they're overdue.
Yeah.
So, what was I saying? So, yeah, you know how you're being measured and how performance is being judged. We've got a way for managing our work, and I can see if things are being ticked off on time or not. And then I trust you. Go and get on with it. If you want to start your day at 10 and work later, that's fine. And so I think those would be those when we work with businesses that kind of have those three things. I think those are the businesses where we see the staff are really happy as well. The staff feel empowered. They have a way of managing their work. They know what's expected of them, and they have that freedom as well.
Yeah. I really like that idea that you've brought up, which has been, a constant thing, but it kind of just hit me just then. I used to work in a law firm. So when you said you got approached by a law firm that did not have a task management system, I was like, ooh, that is a very familiar concept to me.
Yeah,
I find most law firms don't, or the ones that I've worked in at least, don't really have a task management system. So I think having a task management system definitely it changes the environment. Like you said, you find the employees are more happy because they know where they stand and what they have to
yeah,
do and how they're being measured. In my old law firm, it was just emails. So you
it
didn't
also
know what other people were doing, and the lawyer that was working on the case with that other lawyer didn't know when other stuff was due.
yeah,
And it was the most disorganized thing I've ever been through in my entire life, which you'd think
yeah,
for such an important kind of workspace, they would have something
yeah.
like that.
It changes your mindset and your approach to work as well, because again, I was working with a company. This is a big property development company in California, and they again didn't really have a project management tool, and they said our work is very reactive because really they just spend their time, they manage their time and their projects using email. And email is a very reactive tool, as in you get emails from people. And so what do? We respond. If email is the primary way that you kind of manage your work and do your work, your time is sort of being spent reacting to other people. So you email me with a question or a request, I then reply. So I'm constantly reacting to the requests and questions that people have of me. Whereas if you have some kind of work management tool, project management tool, it then switches you to be more proactive. So instead of just reacting to the work all the time, by planning our work, by saying these are the projects or the clients that we have on the go right now, this is what we need to do next for each one, then you can kind of go down that list. You can prioritize and say, this is the one we should work on first. This is the next thing for this client. We can then, if you're using your calendar, great, you can block out time for these things. And it puts you into a more proactive way of working,
Mm.
and rather than just reacting to other people's demands.
Yeah, no, this is a sign to law firms and other firms. Please
That's for
institute a
everyone.
task
Yeah.
management system just for the sake of your employees.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that was a very nice, productive conversation. We're going to talk more about sort of your personal practices and habits.
Yep.
Because, like you said, you're a very
organized person from day dot. So I think the listeners will be very interested to see, what the experts do in their daily life. So, what is a practice that you personally do to deal with procrastination?
Um, I think I've already given my biggest piece of advice, which is using the calendar. But I mean, just to break it down again, like I said before, it's understanding the why or the goal. What is that end result? Where is that end destination? And where do I want to be? What's my plan? Like, what's all the work I need to do? Dissect it. Go through that dissection process. What's every single thing I need to do? And then putting it into a plan on the calendar, actually blocking out time. So that's something, like I said, I started doing at uni 10, 11, no, oh my gosh, longer, like 12 years ago. um, and I've been doing that consistently ever since. Like, for me, so much of productivity is personal, and we've all got different ways of working. If you prefer a paper notebook or a paper system, or you prefer Notion, that's fine. Like, whatever works for you. For me, I've been doing this for 12 years. I couldn't imagine working in a different way. If I want to get something done, it goes on my calendar. And that's the best way to avoid procrastination, I think. I was once in an interview, I was on this productivity panel, and we were all asked, it was me and like two or three other experts, and we were asked, like, do you procrastinate? What do you do? And maybe I was being, I wanted to stand out a little bit from the other experts, but I said something along the lines of, I don't procrastinate. because which is maybe not entirely true, but the point I was making is that because I use my calendar in this way, I always have a plan of what to do next. And okay, if I'm honest, sure, yeah. I procrastinate. I can definitely procrastinate from time to time, but
Yep.
I think having the calendar helping you to plan what you need to do next is like a big game changer. Yeah. If there's one tip I could give people, if you struggle with procrastination, use your calendar and plan what you need to do, and put blocks of time in your calendar for those things, and hold yourself to them.
I would have been scared if I was on that panel. Okay. So, are there any challenges that you face with this practice?
I think with this specifically, the biggest, you actually mentioned it earlier, which is that there's sometimes a danger of, you make the plan, you start doing the work, and then you realize, I haven't scheduled enough time. That's probably the biggest obstacle or resistance that I face when people listen to this advice. They say, well, they either say, I might start the work and the plan's not quite right. So how do I deal with it? Or they say, well, actually, I need to be more reactive. My work is so reactive. I can't possibly schedule my time like you do. And I need to be reactive just like everyone else. The great thing is with this method is, if I put something on my calendar, number one, if I don't make enough time for it, I can spend more time on it. I can just bump whatever blocks that I'm not going to have time for today. I can bump those to tomorrow or the next day. So I always have my calendar open. I can look at it right now. It's on my screen. It's not something I look at a couple of times a day. I am looking at my calendar hundreds of times a day, and I actually move things around all day, every day. So even if I finish a task early, I will actually adjust the block and say, okay, that task that I thought was going to take an hour took 45 minutes. So I'll actually shrink it to show that it only took 45 minutes. So in that way, I'm actually using my calendar to actually track my time. Everything that I've already done is the actual. So if I look at my Monday, I can see exactly how I spent my time on Monday. So it's almost like a way of journaling, or like recording how I spent my time, which is really useful. If something takes longer, I'll make the block bigger, and I'll move other blocks around. So I'm constantly editing my calendar. I'm constantly shuffling things around, playing kind of Tetris on my calendar, trying to get everything to fit in nicely, a bit like you do with Tetris. So even if I have to be reactive, if I spend more time than I thought I would on a task, I can move things around. The other thing to do as well is, when you are doing that plan, try and budget more time than you think you need. So if you think something might take half an hour, just put an hour in. Be more conservative. And then if you finish early, you've kind of like gifted yourself free time, because it's like, oh, great, now I've got an extra half an hour. I
Yeah.
can do this other task or whatever else. Yeah, you've kind of got this free time now. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest challenge is, if anyone that feels they need to be more reactive, or that this is too much of a rigid system, to use it to have success with the system, it does require you to be sort of checking in with your calendar regularly and moving things around, constantly replanning. So my planning, actually, the final thing I'll say is, I don't plan I do a weekly plan. Like on a Friday, I do plan my upcoming week. But planning for me is not something that happens once or twice a week or at the start of the day. Like I think earlier I said, I don't plan at the start of the day. I'm always planning. Every time I finish a task on a project, like if I finish a call with a client or if I finish a piece of work, the very next question I ask myself is, what's next? What for this project or this client, what do I need to do next? So I then create a task or I'll put a block on my calendar. And so I'm constantly making time for the next thing that I need to do. That's why I don't start my day by writing a to-do list, because the to-do list is constantly updating
Yeah.
in my Asana and on my calendar. I'm constantly updating it. So I'm actually always planning. So that's the final thing I would say is yeah, just having blocking out a bit more time than you think you need and allowing for the system to be flexible, shuffling things around as you go.
Yeah, for sure. So you've kind of answered most of the questions, but I guess, um, is this a practice that you think everyone can implement, or is this more like sort of person to person thing?
I'm sure there are going to be certain types of job or people that just this will not work. Not, I don't expect everyone to work this way. I've talked about time blocking with lots of people, and I've faced some resistance from people because they think it's too rigid, or how do I need to be reactive. They then give it a go and realize, oh, actually, this is really cool. This is helping a lot.
Yeah.
Um, the other advice I give is you don't have to block out specific tasks like I do. Sometimes you could just block out like themes or different types of work. So you might block out like, okay, admin. Admin might be, like, I don't know, doing invoicing or I don't know, any kind of like mundane administrative tasks. And then you might have a block for like uh, email. Like I'm going to clear my inbox. You might have a block for client work. Now, you might not go into the details of what clients that is or what projects you're working on, but you can block out, this is a period, like 3 hours I'm just going to spend on client work. So you can start with a bit of a higher level plan. You don't have to block out specific tasks. So that's something, if you're listening to this and you're sort of not sure or interested in giving it a go, you could start doing that. But I'm totally realistic to the fact that not everyone works the same way. Um, Definitely, please feel free to try what I've talked about today. But at the end of the day, you've got to do what works for you as well. And if you prefer like a good old, notebook and pen, if that's what works for you, do what works for you, and do what is going to be sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really like what you brought up before in terms of like blocking out time, but it doesn't have to be a specific task. It just sort of be like related to that kind of thing, like sort of blocking out time, like, oh, this is when I'm going to work on this thing that's related to this, sort of like client
Yeah.
work. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to respond to client emails. Like it's not going to be like, oh, I'm working on this particular case with this particular firm and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. It can be like, oh, I'm just going to work on my cases and just sort
Yeah.
of like round it out like that. So I really like that. I think I will definitely, it's
Yeah.
something I would
Even
will
just
implement.
even just making time for like, okay, I'm going to spend an hour in the morning just clearing my email and inbox. I'm going to do 2 hours of client work. I'm then going to have an hour of phone calls that I need to make. Just putting in some of those big blocks can be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
making time for email is a good one as well. Like rather than just constantly dipping into your email throughout the day, like make a block for email in the morning, get it done, and then try not to revisit it until the afternoon. And that way you can kind of make time for more deep work where you can say, right, I've got 2 or 3 hours of client work. I'm going to shut down my email. I'm going to turn off Slack or Microsoft Teams so I can't be distracted. And now I can do that. We call it deep work. I don't know if you've read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, but that sort of highly focused work where you don't want to be distracted. So kind of blocking out time for email to like deal with everyone's responses, get that reactive stuff out of the way so that you can then not be distracted and do some deep work is a really good idea.
Definitely. So, based on your experience, do you have any other sort of recommendations of practices that you can pair with this? I think we sort of touched on this before in terms of like pairing your calendar with like something like Asana or Notion.
Yeah.
We use Asana at work, which is great and
Oh,
it's
nice.
so helpful to kind of have those two things.
Yeah.
But based on your experience, do you have any recommendations on how people can pair this with something else or improve this practice?
Mm. No, to be honest, I think I've already shared most of the tips. Like I do think the calendar and some kind of work management system do go hand in hand. Like I said, I don't think it's either or. I think you sort of need both. I mean, everyone uses a calendar, pretty much, for appointments and things. So I think it's just about taking it to that next level. And like I said, your task list is really just a list of good intentions. So those. I mean, the calendar and task list. That's the main pairing, to be honest. I mean, sometimes that you can automate. I've got my calendar connected to like my sales CRM as well, Pipedrive. So if I schedule like important sales based activities, it might be like creating a proposal or like booking an introductory call or a demo call with somebody. Like I can have that connected to my Pipedrive. So with like your CRM, like connecting that, and so that some of your things are happening automatically is quite cool. Like actually, all of my bookings basically happen through Calendly. So I've got my Calendly connected to my calendar. So when somebody books a call, it automatically goes in, which is nice. So I mean, that's the only other thing to consider is like connecting your calendar to other apps that you use for like making scheduling really easy.
Definitely, yeah. Having everything connected has this like changed my life in the
Yeah.
past couple of months. Being able to have the same thing on my laptop and my phone and having them talk to each other is
Yeah.
just so helpful. So I highly recommend to anyone listening,
Ah,
yeah, keep those things connected.
maybe one other thing is like using shared calendars as well is really useful. Like even for your personal things. Like my wife and I have a shared calendar. So I actually, for my calendar, I actually use the Apple calendar. I'm on a Mac, so I use the Apple calendar. And the really nice thing about that is that I can actually sync multiple accounts to it. So I've got my Google calendar, which is my work calendar is all Google. And so, but if I just logged into Google Calendar, I would only see my work. But by syncing that to my Apple calendar, or I think can you? I don't know if you can sync Google to Outlook. I don't know, but there are
Not
other
sure.
there are other calendar applications out there. Like Fantastical is a really popular one. So by syncing my Google Calendar to my Apple Calendar, and I've got my iCloud. So iCloud is my personal life. That's kind of how I divide everything. iCloud is personal, like I've got my iCloud email and calendar, and then I've got my work email and calendar. So both of those things show up on my Apple Calendar. I've got my work and my personal both in one place. And so then my wife and I, we have a shared calendar. So if there's things we both need to be aware of, like if like picking up our boy from kindy, like if who's responsible for that, or this weekend we've got a 30th that we're both going to, so that's in the calendar, or if it's like catching up with family or something, that goes in the calendar because we both need to be aware of it. So that's another really good one. But yeah, maybe more, I mean, definitely professional, but I do this quite a lot on the personal side, is like sharing a calendar with my wife so that I've sort of dragged her into some of my productivity habits. But no, we love it because it just means, and actually, what's funny is we, when we, at the gym, we go to a CrossFit gym and we have some really good friends there, and people will laugh at us because if we plan to do something with our friends, people will be like, "Oh, which one of you is going to put it in the calendar?" So people know that we work this way as a
The
couple.
known thing.
So it's quite funny, but it's a really useful thing to do, is just having like a shared calendar with people that you need to connect with. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think that's really great. Yeah, if it's like friendships, work, relationships, yeah, it's so helpful to have, yeah, and especially in families when you've got like, kids and that kind of thing. And it's so helpful to just be able to pop on and just be like, what, what am I supposed to be doing today?
Yeah.
So yeah, those things are really good recommendations. Thank you for those.
Mm.
So that pretty much wraps up that portion. So we're going to move into what we call open mic now. So this is where you have the opportunity to take this conversation wherever you want to go. I know you said you're a bit prone to sort of rambling and going down rabbit holes. This is your opportunity to make the most of that skill. So is there anything that you sort of wanted to bring to the floor or to the listeners, or just discuss? Anything that you want to talk about? It's all yours.
Oh man, that's too open a question for me. I mean, we could talk about Bitcoin. Like I said, it's something I'm interested in, and I could share a little bit about that and why I'm interested in it if you
I'm
care
very
to learn about that.
fascinated.
But we don't have
Yeah.
to.
No, I'm really fascinated. No, I'm super fascinated. I have so many friends who discuss it, and I'm so confused by the entire concept because I'm not commerce at all. I am all like arts and law.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Bitcoin is just this like weird sort of like far off idea. So like how did you get into it? Sort of this is your
Well,
open mic
yeah.
session,
Well,
sorry.
maybe I'll explain, because this is a big topic. Honestly, it's like a whole other show. maybe I'll start by talking about the thing that appeals most to me about it, or why I think the world needs something like Bitcoin, is because if you look at, like, whenever I talk to somebody about it, I say, what problem, what is the problem with money right now? Or if anyone's into like crypto more broadly, I'm not into crypto. I'm into Bitcoin, and obviously there's lots of different cryptocurrencies. I don't dabble in any other cryptocurrencies. I'm only into Bitcoin.
I'll pretend that I know what you mean by that, but I'm sure the
Because
listeners
I'm
do.
sure
So
you've probably heard of like Ethereum,
yes,
like
yes.
so there's some of the other ones, right? So
Okay.
there's different types of cryptocurrency. So it's very much like different types of currency. You've got the US dollar, the Australian dollar. Basically, you've just got different types of cryptocurrency. Um, So I don't care about any of the other ones, and I can explain why. But so if you think about, well, why do we need this thing? Why do we need a digital currency? Like, what problem does it even solve in the first place? Because unless it solves a problem, why would we use it? You know. And some people say, well, with cryptocurrency, it's a faster form of payment or whatever. And I don't know that that's necessarily the problem that it solves. Because if you think about it, if you buy a coffee now today, you're not suffering from slow payments. Like, you can take your credit card and or whatever card, and you can buy a coffee and you can pay for it instantly, and you're going to walk away with your coffee straight away. So I don't think it solves the slow money problem. I mean, yes, it does take, because there's lines of credit, like a merchant has a credit provider, the final settlement takes a bit longer, but I don't think the velocity of money issue is really the problem. I think the problem that Bitcoin solves is that at the moment, all of the currencies that we use in our lives, whether it's the US dollar, the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, they are controlled, or they're put in place by a central bank. Like here in New Zealand, we have the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. And really, the monetary policy is decided and it's set by a few people. And so what we've witnessed in the last couple of years is central banks and governments around the world to have stimulated their economies to get through COVID. And so they've created a lot of new money. They've just pumped money into the economy. We call it printing new money. It's not actually printing new money. They're not
Yeah.
printing new physical notes. But for all intents and purposes, that's what's happened, is governments have printed new money to keep the economy going. Now, we don't have to get into whether that's justified or not. I mean, yeah, they've shut down economies, so people need some money. But the impact of that money printing is the inflation that we're seeing now. And so what we're seeing now is that everyone's purchasing power is going down. So I think in New Zealand, we're expecting like 7 to 8% inflation this next quarter. So it means that the money that you earned last year is worth less this year. And when you kind of stop and think about it, it's like, I earned however many dollars last year. And it's kind of like this ice cube that's slowly melting. If I leave my money in the bank long enough, over time, even at a modest rate of inflation, my money loses purchasing power over time. But why is that? Like, if I work today and I'm trading my time for money, I want that money that I earn to sustain itself. I want that to last 100 years if I need to. If I want to pass that down to my kids, I don't want my hard work to like erode away. And so that's the problem, I think, with money at the moment. Is it's eroded through inflation, and we're really seeing that now. And so I think the problem is partly that it's controlled by governments and central banks and a few people that get to decide when it's created, and it can, and when that power is abused, it leads to massive inflation, which we're seeing now, which I think was probably going to get worse. So that's the problem. So then you enter something like Bitcoin, and the great innovation of Bitcoin is that nobody controls it. It's often described as like a protocol, like the internet. Nobody controls the internet. Nobody can shut down the internet. You can regulate like internet service providers, and there's a certain amount of regulation that governments can do, but nobody can stop the internet. Really, it's this great technology that allows information to flow freely, businesses to operate online, communication. I can run my business and communicate with clients all around the world, and it's this perfectly like capitalist, democratic tool that gives everyone a voice and gives everyone access to information. And so Bitcoin is like the internet's version of money. It's like nobody controls it, and it has this fixed supply. You can't create any more. So it has this fixed supply of 20. There's actually about 19 million Bitcoin in circulation right now. It will then stop. There's new Bitcoin being created all the time, but that will stop when it reaches 21 million, which will happen in about 100 years' time. The point is it has a very predictable supply schedule. And this might be all over your head.
This is so fascinating. No, continue. I've got no idea what you're talking about, but it's really cool.
So it has this predictable supply schedule. You can't create any more past that 21 million cap. So it's this great way of preserving your money and your wealth. So instead of inflation kind of eroding your purchasing power over time, if you store your savings and your wealth in something like Bitcoin, which can't be controlled by anyone, and it doesn't get inflated away through irresponsible money printing, it allows you to preserve the work that you've done today for your kids and for you to enjoy in the future without it slowly melting away like regular money. So that's sort of that's the introduction I like to give to Bitcoin. Before we talk about how it works and why it's different to the others, I think it's important to understand the problem that it solves.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. Yeah.
That's so interesting because, I feel like people, I have heard about it, obviously, and because I'm still at university, and so I've got a bunch of commerce friends who are like,
Yeah.
that is their entire existence. And so I see it, but and I feel like that some of the listeners can definitely relate to this. You see it everywhere and it's talked about everywhere, but I have absolutely no idea like what,
Yeah.
like what it is. But I really like that you explained what problem it solves and what it fixes, because that was not something that I was aware of like at all. Like I was just sort of like, this is something that some like commerce geeky dude has just like pulled
Yeah.
out of thin air and just made everyone's life a whole lot more difficult. But it actually makes a lot more sense when you put it like
Yeah.
that and what it
When
solves.
people introduce it, you say, what is Bitcoin? It's a peer-to-peer decentralized digital currency. That's kind of the definition that people throw around. And then you try and explain that to somebody. It's like, hang on, what? Like, why do I need this? What is it about? So before we get into how it works or what does decentralized peer-to-peer digital currency mean, just start with what problem does it solve? And I think in the Western world, we haven't needed something like a cryptocurrency until now that we're seeing massive inflation. Other countries who have witnessed like a huge reduction in their purchasing power, places like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, I think Turkey at the moment is seeing something like 50% inflation at the moment. So that's like your earnings have been cut in half, 50%. Like what you can buy today, inflation is like this hidden. It's like a hidden tax in a way, because your purchasing power has gone down. And so in the Western world, we typically haven't needed Bitcoin until now because we haven't experienced the downsides of an unstable currency, where other countries have. And so, and like, look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the moment. People on both sides, the Russians and Ukrainians are, to escape their country with their assets, are using something like Bitcoin because they can't carry their house out of the country.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard to move money out of your country depending on the financial system that you live in, especially Russia, who's been cancelled by everyone. They've been disconnected from the SWIFT payment system. They've had massive sanctions put on them. So for Russians who are like, maybe it's Russian people who don't support the war, they just want to get out because they're like, oh my gosh, my country's our currency is collapsing. They have this lifeboat that is Bitcoin that helps them to get out. So we haven't needed that yet in Australia and New Zealand. So we've been slower to understand the benefits of it. But other countries who have seen like massive inflation or who have had their bank accounts frozen, look at what happened in Canada with the protests with the truckers recently. Yeah. And the government said, we're going to freeze bank accounts of anyone that's supporting this movement. So the government's basically saying, if we don't agree with you, we can freeze your money. And that's kind of like, especially somewhere like Canada, like a very democratic country,
exactly.
It's like, oh man, if that could happen there, I mean, geez, I suppose it could happen anywhere.
So
people realizing maybe the money in the bank is not really mine. It's like, maybe I don't have control of it. So I think people are starting to realize the value in something like Bitcoin.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think, just learning about it and being a bit more educated about it, I feel like people will then sort of open up to it a little bit. Because I feel like if you don't know about it, it's just kind of like, this is something for people with bigger brains than mine, and I'm just never going to grasp this concept. So I think, education around it is
that
Great point.
podcast that I mentioned, What Bitcoin Did, is really good. And like, I think where we are in the adoption cycle, we're sort of, I think we're at like 130, 150 million people have or use Bitcoin at the moment.
Wow.
So it's the equivalent of, it's actually not a lot. It's actually the equivalent of where the adoption of the internet was in the year 1997, 98.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah. No.
so, yeah, you're actually like, oh, wow. Like if there were 130, 150 million people using the internet in 97, then the internet went through, we saw a massive explosion in the adoption of the internet, sort of in the early 2000s and the mid 2000s, the 2000s really, 2000 to 2010, the internet exploded. We saw like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, all these big companies emerge in that period of time. And I think that's where we're starting to get to with Bitcoin. Is it's been around for like 11 years, and that first 10% adoption has taken about 10 or 11 years. But I think, the next 10 years, I think we're going to see a lot more people getting on. So I think it's still very early days as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for educating us on that
Yeah.
interesting topic and bringing it to the floor. Yeah. And for those who are more interested, yeah, go and do some research because it sounds like
Yeah.
something that, yeah, we should definitely be educated on.
Mm.
Great. Okay. So, coming into our last segment, we're going to top it off with some audience questions. So, we've got
Cool.
2 to 3 audience questions that we're going to run through that we've gathered. So, our first question is, how can we teach ourselves to acknowledge the consequences of procrastination and not continue to overlook them?
Ooh, great question. Teaching yourself the consequences, I suppose. I often, if I've procrastinated on something, I then think about like, how would I have, how would my life have been easier or less stressful or just better if I hadn't have done this? Like, okay, I've procrastinated now. I've missed that deadline. Maybe my boss is annoyed at me, or in my case, maybe my client's annoyed at me because I said I'd do something but I didn't. I've let them down. And focusing on that, okay, yeah, focusing on the consequence, like, man, this sucks. Especially for me, like, working in my own business, like, where your sort of reputation is very much on the line. I've always tried to focus on like customer satisfaction and being very good with follow-ups and doing things when I say I will do them, holding myself accountable. And so it's a terrible feeling when you like let someone down. And so if I do sort of catch myself procrastinating, I think about like, look, don't let Tia down. Like it's gonna suck. So even if that
Yeah.
means maybe I email you and just shift the deadline and say, hey Tia, like I'm having trouble with this. It's maybe taking longer than I thought.
Mm.
I'll get back to you by the end of the week. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So open communication, I think, is really useful. Is just being realistic with your deadlines and when you can get things done, and communicating that to whoever needs to be in the loop. But yeah, I think the answer is sort of in the question. focus
Yeah.
focus on those
The
consequences, and
repercussions.
if you're like me, you'll be like, oh man, that felt horrible. I don't want to let them down again. So I'm not going to procrastinate next time.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the repercussions of the consequences of procrastination will teach you in and of itself. Okay, great. So, second question we have is, what advice would you give to someone who procrastinates mainly because they work better under pressure?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good one, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. Part of me is like, well, what I said earlier, do what works for you. If you can honestly put your hand on your heart and say that you're going to do a better job by leaving it to the last minute, and you thrive under pressure, and if you think that's genuinely going to lead to a better outcome, I'm a bit skeptical of this, to be honest, but maybe
Interesting.
it's just
Yeah.
because I work differently. If you think that you work better that way and that works for you, okay. I mean, they say, what does they say? Pressure creates diamonds,
Yeah.
you know? So I'm skeptical a little bit of that, but if you do well under pressure, and if you feel like, look, if I leave it to the last minute and I just need some Red Bulls and I'm going to pump this out in the last minute, if you don't mind that pressure, I mean, for me, I can't think of anything worse. But if that works for you, great, do it.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I like that you brought it up in terms of like, if you genuinely think that you do better under pressure than you do if you gave yourself time? Like, is the quality going to be like the same or better?
Well, that's a good point. Maybe you can change the pressure and changing the pressure from getting this done on time. If you maybe you can apply pressure by holding yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm rather than leaving it to the last minute and putting myself under a time pressure, I'm going to get started earlier because I'm going to hold myself to such a high standard that if I don't do this well enough to a point where I'm really happy, I'm going to let myself down. I'm going to let my clients down. So that's another way to look at it is pressure. Yeah, putting yourself under pressure based on the standards you hold yourself to. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And our final question is I like this question. How seriously do we need to take procrastination?
Yeah, I mean, it might depend on the individual. If it's like for me, and maybe this is a big-headed of me, like like I said, I haven't struggled too much with procrastination in the last few years because I think I've got a good system in place.
Mm.
I don't. I mean, I do sometimes. Like, yeah, maybe oh man, I'll just check my phone quickly, and I can be guilty of just like I don't know, killing some time on Twitter if I need to. But I haven't procrastinated to the point where it's like, oh no, I'm letting my clients down or I'm dropping the ball. I haven't gotten
Yeah.
to that stage yet. Um,
The
but
second
if you
part of
are,
that question is there is a second part of that question. The second part of that question, because it says, how seriously do we need to take procrastination? Is there a vast difference between procrastination and being lazy? So
mm,
maybe I think that's an interesting point. I'm sort of
yeah,
interested in terms of what you think the difference is there.
yeah, I think, so I think I would say, if you're sort of like, oh, is procrastination a big deal? I would just look at sort of, well, what is the impact? Like kind of the previous question, what are the consequences? Like if you do procrastinate, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe the consequences aren't that bad if you procrastinate. I don't know. So in that case, yeah, maybe it's not a big deal if you put things off, depending on the work that you do. For me, like I said, my priority in my business is making sure my clients are happy and that we deliver our projects on time and on scope, and we follow through with what we said we would do.
Yep.
And so the consequences of that are, if we don't do that, it makes us look bad, and that's not acceptable. So like if we ever have a delay on a project or something's going to take longer, we communicate that. We will say, look, this has taken longer than expected. Here's the reason why. Can we shift the deadline? So that's where, like I said, the communication, being transparent is really important to us. And with my team, I've always said, like, as long as we are communicating with our clients and keeping them in the loop of our progress and when to expect things, if it takes longer than we say it's going to take, that's fine because we've communicated it.
Yeah.
So I just hold myself to a higher standard. If we do procrastinate, it's sort of like, to a degree, it gets to that point where it's sort of unacceptable. And then the question about laziness, yeah. Again, it depends what you're doing because, as we talked about at the start, there's different types of procrastination. So you might be procrastinating with just other work. So that's not lazy. Laziness, I suppose, is, I guess, like genuinely. What is laziness? I guess it's kind of like genuinely doing nothing when you should be doing something productive, like at work, that
Yeah.
you asked earlier about managers keeping tabs on their team. Well, if you are sitting at home watching Netflix when you should be working and you've got work to do, yeah, I suppose that's probably lazy.
That's
But
straight being lazy.
yeah. But at the same time, I actually don't mind, and I actually almost encourage a bit of laziness when it's warranted. Like being in sort of the productivity self-improvement space, years ago I would put a lot of pressure on myself to like always be learning, always be using my time really effectively.
Yeah.
um I know people that in the evenings they won't watch Netflix, they'll be reading a book, because why would you watch Netflix when you could read a really good book and learn something new and be improving yourself? And I used to be more that way. Now I'm just like, you know what, the whole self-development, just being so obsessed with like self-development and improvement all the time gets exhausting. So I actually don't mind a bit of laziness in the right context. So for me, if I've worked all day, if I want to go on the PlayStation in the evening and go do game with my friends, or watch Netflix and watch a movie with my wife, like some people might look at that and go, well, you could be reading a book. You could be reading a book about self-improvement or doing something more productive with your time.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like, you know what? That's fine. I don't care. I'll be lazy because I know I've worked hard over here, and I'm going to reward myself with some laziness over here.
Yeah.
And take that pressure off of constantly needing to improve myself or constantly needing to optimize every minute of my day.
Definitely.
Sometimes it's okay to just like do nothing.
Yeah, have some downtime. I think that's always really important. And there is that clear difference between procrastinating and actually giving yourself like a break.
Yeah.
And giving yourself some downtime. So very important. Well, thank you for answering all those audience questions. I hope they were helpful. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our podcast today. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here. I know we've all learnt a lot. And for people who want to learn a little bit more about what you do, where can they go?
Best place to go is my website, Paul Minors. That's Paul, MINORS.com. So you can find me there. You can contact me there. I also have a YouTube channel. If you put my name into YouTube, I make a lot of videos about Pipedrive and Asana and different productivity apps and things. And Twitter as well. I enjoy procrastinating at times on Twitter. So you can connect with me there. Yeah.
Yep. Note that you can find Paul procrastinating on Twitter. There you go.
When I've earned it and done some work.
Exactly.
You have been listening to Work in Progress, the personal productivity science insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 life management perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps others find us and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Tia Harmer. Thanks for tuning in.